The wind carried a faint bugle call across Arlington's rolling hills, where flags snapped crisply under a gray sky. Samuel Tate, 78, stood outside the cemetery's black iron gate, his faded army jacket pressed but threadbare. His hands, one scarred, one trembling, clutched a laminated ID from 1972. The patch on his sleeve read, "Clara," stitched unevenly by his late daughter. A young guard, barely 25, scanned his clipboard. "Sir, you're not on the list. This is a closed funeral for General Marcus Reed." Samuel's eyes, sharp despite his age, met the guard's. "I served with him. Vietnam." The guard's gaze flicked to the patch, then away. No clearance, no entry. Samuel didn't argue. He stepped back, boots scuffing gravel, and stood rigid, facing the gate. Beyond it, white chairs filled with brass and dignitaries. A Marine honor guard rehearsed silently. Samuel's ID, cracked and yellowed, hung from his chest. He'd carried it since discharge, a relic of a life forgotten. A second guard smirked. "Nice patch, Pops. Your kid make that?" Samuel's jaw tightened, but he stayed still, eyes on the distant canopy where Reed's casket would rest. Guests flashed credentials and passed through. A few glanced at Samuel, curiosity, not recognition. A photographer turned his lens away. The ceremony's hum grew louder, muffled commands, the clink of metals. Samuel's leg ached, but he didn't waver. He wasn't here for pomp. He was here for a promise made in a Mekong Delta foxhole, when Reed, bleeding, whispered, "Don't let me go alone. If you believe honor deserves a voice, type duty below." Samuel waited, unnoticed. As the funeral began, Samuel Tate stood like a sentinel, the cold iron gate barring him from the funeral. The sky darkened, clouds heavy with unshed rain, mirroring the weight in his chest. His jacket, once olive green, now faded to gray, bore the Clara patch, stitched with love, now a quiet rebellion against the guard's dismissal. The young soldier, clipboard in hand, avoided Samuel's gaze, tapping his tablet with mechanical precision. "Sir, you can't loiter here," he said, voice flat. Samuel didn't budge. His scarred hand adjusted the ID pinned to his chest, the photo inside showing a younger man, eyes fierce, unbowed. Beyond the gate, the ceremony unfolded. Flags lined the path, their colors muted in the overcast light. Officers in crisp uniforms moved with purpose, their boots echoing on the gravel. A woman in a dress uniform glanced at Samuel, her brow furrowing, but she hurried past. The guard muttered to a colleague, "Old guy thinks he's special." A faint chuckle followed. Samuel heard it, felt it, but his face remained stone, eyes locked on the canopy where General Reed's legacy would be honored. He remembered Reed's laugh, raw and defiant, in the jungle's heat. They'd shared cigarettes, promises, and fear. "If I fall, Sam, carry me home." That vow held Samuel here, rooted despite the ache in his knees. A group of young soldiers passed, one tossing an energy drink can. "Yo, Grandpa's still here," one said, smirking. They laughed, careless, their voices fading into the wind. Samuel's hand brushed the Clara patch, grounding him. "If you believe promises outlast time, type duty below." The anthem's first notes drifted over, and Samuel straightened, alone but unyielding. The wind sharpened, tugging at Samuel Tate's worn jacket as he stood outside the gate. The Clara patch, its stitches frayed but bold, seemed to glow against the faded fabric. Inside, the funeral gained momentum, chairs filled, flags rippled, and the honor guard's rifles gleamed under dim sunlight. Samuel's eyes traced the path to the canopy, where General Reed's casket waited. The young guard, now joined by another, glanced at Samuel with a smirk. "Still here, sir? You're not getting in," he said, tapping his tablet. Samuel's response was silence, his posture rigid, a soldier's discipline unbroken. A group of young Marines, fresh-faced and loud, sauntered by, their dress blues pristine. One noticed Samuel, nudging his friend. "Check the old-timer. Thinks he's at the wrong century's war." Laughter spilled out, careless, cutting. The tallest Marine pointed at the Clara patch. "What's that, your dog's name?" he mocked, leaning closer. Samuel's hand, scarred from shrapnel, rose to cover the patch, his gaze steady, unflinching. The Marine's grin faltered, but his friends chuckled, moving on. No one intervened. An officer nearby, engrossed in his phone, ignored the scene. Samuel's leg throbbed. the old wound from Vietnam protesting the hours of standing. He didn't shift. He saw Reed's face in his mind, blood-streaked, grinning after a close call. "You're my brother, Sam. Don't forget me." The memory anchored him. Beyond the gate, the crowd hushed as a eulogy began, words lost in the breeze. Samuel's ID swayed, its lamination catching a stray ray of light. "If you believe respect outlives ridicule, type duty below." The Marines drifted away, but Samuel remained, a quiet monument to a promise kept. Samuel Tate's shadow stretched long across the gravel, the iron gate still unyielding before him. The Clara patch, a silent tribute to his daughter, clung to his sleeve, its uneven stitches a map of loss. The funeral's rhythm pulsed faintly, muffled commands, the soft clink of metals, the rustle of flags. Samuel's eyes, sharp despite the years, fixed on the canopy where General Reed's casket rested, draped in stars and stripes. The young guard, now bored, scrolled his tablet, oblivious to the old man's resolve. "You're wasting your time, sir," he muttered, not looking up. A breeze carried the faint wail of taps, each note piercing Samuel's chest like a remembered bullet. He stood taller, ignoring the ache in his leg, the ghost of shrapnel from a night in '71 when he dragged Reed from a burning outpost. "Stay with me, Marcus," he'd whispered then. Now, he was here to keep that vow. A cluster of civilians passed, flashing VIP badges. One woman, gray-haired, paused, her eyes lingering on Samuel's ID, its faded photo barely visible. She hesitated, then walked on, whispering to her companion. The young Marines returned, their laughter quieter now. One, the tallest, stopped, studying Samuel. "You really knew the general?" he asked, almost curious. Samuel nodded once. "Served together. He was my friend." The Marine shifted, uncomfortable, then rejoined his group. Their chatter faded as they moved toward the ceremony. Samuel's hand brushed the Clara patch, grounding him against the dismissal. "If you believe loyalty endures beyond gates, type duty below." The sky darkened, rain threatening, but Samuel stood firm, his gaze unwavering, a soldier honoring a bond no list could erase. Rain began to speckle the gravel, but Samuel Tate didn't move from his post outside the iron gate. The Clara patch, damp but defiant, held fast to his sleeve, a beacon of his daughter's love. Beyond, the funeral solemnity deepened, rifle volleys cracked, sharp against the drizzle. Samuel's faded ID glistened, its cracked lamination reflecting a sliver of cloud. The young guard, now under an umbrella, glanced at him with impatience. "Sir, you should go. It's over soon," he said, voice clipped. Samuel's silence answered, his eyes fixed on the canopy, where General Reed's legacy unfolded. A captain, mid-40s, stood near the gate, his uniform crisp, a silver oak leaf on his collar. He'd watched Samuel since the anthem, noting the old man's unyielding stance. His gaze lingered on the Clara patch, then the prosthetic glint beneath Samuel's pant leg, barely visible. The captain's jaw tightened when the young Marines passed again, one muttering, "Stubborn old fool." Their laughter stung, but Samuel only straightened, his scarred hand steadying the ID. The captain stepped closer, unnoticed, his boots silent on the wet ground. Samuel's mind drifted to Vietnam, the jungle's heat, Reed's voice cracking through radio static. "Sam, you're my anchor." That night, Samuel had carried him, wounded, through gunfire. Now, he stood for the same man, barred by rules but bound by honor. The captain, still watching, scribbled something on a notepad. Rain blurred the ink, but his eyes stayed sharp. "If you believe some see what others miss, type duty below." The ceremony's final notes echoed, and Samuel's leg trembled, but he held firm, a promise heavier than the rain keeping him rooted. The rain fell harder, soaking Samuel Tate's faded jacket, but he stood unwavering outside the iron gate. The Clara patch, now slick with water, clung to his sleeve, its stitches a quiet testament to love lost. Beyond the bars, the funeral's final moments unfolded. Officers saluted, a folded flag passed to a grieving widow. Samuel's eyes, undimmed by the downpour, traced the canopy where General Reed's urn rested. The young guard, huddled under his umbrella, sighed. "Sir, it's done. Go home," he said, voice edged with annoyance. Samuel's silence held firm, his scarred hand brushing the damp ID. The captain, still watching from the gate's shadow, stepped forward, his boots splashing softly. His eyes, sharp with purpose, lingered on Samuel's prosthetic leg, then the Clara patch. He'd seen the young Marine's mockery, heard their careless jabs. Now, he turned to an aide, whispering, "Find out who he is." The aide nodded, hurrying toward the command tent. Samuel, unaware, stood straighter, rain tracing his weathered face. He remembered Reed's hand gripping his in a Saigon medevac, whispering, "You're my brother, Sam. Don't let me fade." The Marines passed again, quieter now, their boots sloshing. The tallest one, who'd mocked the patch, hesitated, his gaze flickering with guilt. "Sorry, sir," he muttered, barely audible. Samuel nodded, his face unreadable, forgiving without words. The crowd inside began to disperse, umbrellas blooming like dark flowers. The captain's aide returned, whispering urgently. The captain's expression shifted, recognition, respect. "If you believe promises outweigh protocol, type duty below." Rain blurred Samuel's vision, but he didn't waver, his heart fixed on a vow made decades ago, stronger than the storm or the gate between him and Reed. Rain drummed on Samuel Tate's shoulders, his army jacket heavy but unmoving outside the iron gate. The Clara patch, soaked yet vivid, held its place, a silent vow to his daughter. Beyond, the funeral's crowd thinned, flags drooping under the downpour. General Reed's urn gleamed faintly under the canopy, a beacon for Samuel's steady gaze. The young guard, now restless, snapped, "Sir, you're getting soaked. Leave." Samuel's scarred hand touched the Clara patch, grounding him. His prosthetic leg ached, but his spine stayed rigid, honoring a promise from a Vietnam foxhole. The captain, silver oak leaf glinting, emerged from the command tent, his face taut with purpose. He'd learned Samuel's name, his service, his sacrifice. Whispering to a senior officer, he gestured toward the gate. General Thomas Kane, 4 stars on his shoulders, turned, his gray eyes narrowing. The captain spoke low, urgent, pointing at Samuel. Kane's expression softened, a memory stirring. Saigon, 1971. A soldier dragging 2 men from death's grip. He handed his gloves to an aide and started across the wet grass, ignoring protocol. The young Marines, lingering nearby, fell silent, sensing the shift. The tallest one, who'd apologized, watched wide-eyed. Samuel didn't notice Kane approaching. His focus remained on the urn, on Reed's voice in his memory. "Don't let me go alone, Sam." Rain streaked his face, hiding tears he wouldn't admit. The crowd parted, whispers rippling. "If you believe honor breaks barriers, type duty below." Kane's boots splashed closer, his shadow falling over Samuel. The old man looked up, startled, as the general stopped before him. Rain-soaked, his hand rising not in command but in reverence, ready to salute a forgotten hero. The rain fell in sheets, cloaking Samuel Tate in a sheen of water, his faded jacket clinging to his frame. The Clara patch, drenched but unbroken, glowed faintly on his sleeve, a tether to his daughter's memory. Beyond the gate, General Reed's urn stood alone under the canopy, the funeral nearly dissolved. Samuel's eyes, clear despite the storm, held steady, his scarred hand resting on his cracked ID. The young guard, now silent, watched from under his umbrella, sensing something shifting. Samuel's prosthetic leg trembled, but his posture was iron, forged by a promise kept through decades. General Thomas Kane, 4 stars gleaming wetly, stood before Samuel, rain streaking his pristine uniform. The crowd hushed, cameras turning, their lenses catching the moment. Kane's hand rose, not in a crisp salute but a slow, deliberate gesture, heavy with respect. "Sergeant Tate," he said, voice low, cutting through the rain. "Marcus told me about you. Mekong, 71. You saved him." Samuel blinked, rain or tears blurring his vision. "I just kept my word, sir," he whispered, voice rough but steady. The young Marines, soaked and still, stood at attention, their earlier mockery forgotten. The tallest one's eyes dropped, ashamed. Kane gestured to an aide, who approached with Reed's folded flag, its stars vivid against the gray. "He wanted you to have this," Kane said. Samuel's hands, one scarred, one trembling, accepted it, the weight heavier than memory. "If you believe heroes stand tallest in silence, type duty below." The crowd watched, breathless, as Samuel clutched the flag to his chest, the Clara patch beneath it, his promise to Reed fulfilled in a salute that echoed beyond the gate. Rain softened to a drizzle. cloaking Samuel Tate in a quiet mist as he stood before the open gate. The Clara patch, damp but enduring, rested against the folded flag he now held, its stars pressed to his chest. General Reed's urn, under the canopy, seemed closer now, a promise nearly complete. General Kane stood beside Samuel, his 4-star insignia dulled by rain but bright with intent. "Walk with me, Sergeant," he said, voice steady. Samuel nodded, his prosthetic legs stiff but obedient, his scarred hand clutching the flag tightly. The crowd parted, their whispers fading into reverence. The young Marines, now rigid with respect, saluted as Samuel passed, the tallest one's eyes meeting his with unspoken apology. Samuel's boots, worn but polished, stepped onto the ceremonial path, gravel crunching softly. Kane matched his pace, not leading, not following, but equal, a brother in arms. The canopy loomed ahead, Reed's urn waiting, a silent call from a Mekong night when Samuel had carried him through fire. "You're my anchor, Sam," Reed had said. Now, Samuel carried him again. An aide handed Samuel a small bronze plaque, etched with Reed's name. He placed it beside the urn, his trembling fingers brushing the Clara patch. The crowd stood, some saluting, others with hands over hearts. A woman, silver-haired in dress blues, whispered, "For Clara." Samuel's throat tightened, he hadn't expected her name to echo here. "If you believe promises bind us forever, type, duty, below." The rain ceased, sunlight breaking through, bathing the urn in gold. Samuel stepped back, flag in hand, his duty done, not for glory, but for a friend who never forgot him. Sunlight pierced the clouds, casting a warm glow over Samuel Tate as he stood by the canopy, the folded flag heavy in his arms. The Clara patch, now drying, held fast to his sleeve, a quiet reminder of his daughter's love. General Reed's urn gleamed on the marble pedestal, its bronze plaque catching the light. Samuel's eyes, weathered but clear, lingered on it, memories of Vietnam flooding back, Reed's laugh, their shared survival, the vow to never leave each other behind. General Kane, 4 stars shining, stood beside him, silent, respectful. The crowd, still gathered, watched in reverence. The young Marines, their earlier laughter replaced by awe, stood at attention, the tallest one salute unwavering. Samuel's prosthetic leg ached, but he didn't falter. He placed the flag beside the urn, his scarred hand steady, fulfilling Reed's final wish. "You carried him home, Sergeant," Kane said softly. Samuel nodded, voice gone, the Clara patch his only reply. A lone bugler played taps, each note sinking deep, binding past to present. Veterans in the crowd stood, some with canes, others with medals pinned to civilian coats. A woman, her beret tilted, whispered, "For all who served." Samuel's chest tightened. Clara's name, Reed's memory, now woven into this moment. He stepped back, the gate behind him no longer a barrier. If you believe honor lives in quiet acts, type, duty, below and subscribe. Samuel turned, sunlight warming his face, and walked the gravel path, not alone. A small plaque would soon mark this ground. For Samuel and Clara Tate, honor carried forever. No statue, just truth. As he left, the crowd stood, not for ceremony, but for a man who proved some promises never fade.